And then I respond saying, I actually have my own sources who say he didn't. And then you say, well, your sources are not valid because they won't put their names on it. Okay, who are your sources? Let's go down the list, and then we'll talk about why they might be saying that.
My sources are the President of the United States, the Vice President of the United States, Kash Patel, the head of the FBI, Dan Bongino, the Deputy Head of the FBI, and Pam Bondi, the Attorney General. And those aren't just my sources. They're everybody's sources because they publicly came out and said this.
Okay, Trump hasn't specifically weighed in on that specific aspect of it. We've all seen the limited things that Trump has said and tweeted on this. And J.D. Vance was calling for transparency and suggesting otherwise prior to taking office. He hasn't commented on this so far, so he's not one of your sources.
Ask him. He's the Vice President.
You've got Kash, you've got Dan, and you've got Pam, and we've already discussed that memo in full detail. I'm talking about people behind the scenes who, prior to Trump taking office, I'm not going to get too specific, but trust me, I have high-level sources who have said they don't believe any of that. Any of that. Okay. So, and I'm not going to out them for purposes of convincing you, but you're telling me name them. No, I'm not going to. I don't have authorization.
I'm not saying
and then you say, well, I dismiss all of it because you won't name them.
Hold on, Megyn, I'm not saying you should name them. I'm saying they should name themselves because otherwise they are being complicit in one of the greatest cover-ups in the history of the American Republic.
That's easy for you to say, Ben. That's very easy for you to say.
Why is that easy for me to say? Why?
Because you'll have your job and you'll have your millions no matter what they do.
Megyn, give me a break. If somebody came out today and they were a whistleblower on the greatest scandal in the history of the American Republic, they would make more money tomorrow than in their entire life working for the FBI. That's ridiculous.
Okay, there are reasons not to cross the people who are in charge. And that's all I'm going to say. And look, this is me not having drawn a conclusion. I don't know what the truth is. I've been reporting in a way, I mean, I see you've taken a side that you've chosen to believe the story that's being offered, and that's fine. A lot of people have. I'm not there yet. I don't actively say that there's a pedophile ring. I don't say any of that. I'm just following the facts, and we're not at the place where I can draw that conclusion.
Well, no, I can draw the conclusion that the evidence that I'm seeing and the people who are speaking about it lead me toward this particular conclusion. And if counter evidence is presented that is not speculative, then I will change my conclusion because that's what I've done on this case. Until this memo came out, I was weighing toward the more extreme version of this theory, and you can look back at my tweets and what I've said about it. And then this came out, and now my perspective has changed. So when the facts change and the people who are speaking
I'm just not that trusting of government. There are other facts. They said not credible. There's no credible evidence. They talked about what was the qualifier they used on the client list? Something like no persuasive client list or something.
Megyn, I'm not that trusting of government either, unless I know the exact people in government we're talking about.
Okay.
Like government is not just a giant.
All I've said so far is I trust Dan.
Blob.
But do you believe that Dan has all the information? You believe Dan Bongino has everything? You believe he's seen all the SDNY had? You believe, what about Julie Brown's claims about the number of data, like the documents, the Department of Homeland Security, flight logs on who was on his planes? Do you believe he has all that in his purview and he's said, I've reviewed it all and none of it's persuasive? I don't believe that. I believe Dan's reviewed what's been made available to him by the pre-existing FBI. And in there, he hasn't come up with anything that proves Epstein was murdered or found some child pedophile ring that's been covered up. That's fine. I'll accept his word and effectively Kash's word and Pam's word to some extent on that. But it doesn't explain all these other questions that existed prior to them taking office that have been raised by people like Julie Brown, that have been raised by people like Pam Bondi before today. And I'm not.
So, here's something wild. Jeffrey Epstein is back in the headlines, and now even Megyn Kelly and Ben Shapiro are weighing in like they're the new Woodward and Bernstein. Yeah, let's talk about the absolute circus unfolding in D.C. over Epstein's files, because it's getting weirder by the hour. Attorney General Pam Bondi says there's no client list, no credible proof Epstein was murdered, and that everything's been reviewed. Meanwhile, Dan Bongino, assistant FBI director, is threatening to resign because of how this has been handled. And Trump? He's calling it a hoax. The same guy who once promised to release the files now doesn't want to talk about it. Curious, right? Even Speaker Mike Johnson chimed in, sort of. He gave this non-answer about transparency, then doubled back saying he was taken out of context. Classic. But buried in all that political spin was something interesting, he said. Ghislaine Maxwell should maybe testify before Congress. That's big. She's actually said she wants to. Why isn't that happening? Lauren Boebert, hilariously, suggested Matt Gaetz be the one to investigate. Because when it comes to sex crimes, naturally you'd call in someone under investigation for the same kind of stuff. You can't make this up. Now, here's where it takes a sharp left turn. Megyn Kelly and Ben Shapiro are now Epstein truthers. On Kelly's podcast, they went at it arguing over sources, credibility, and whether Trump is in the files. Megyn says he probably is. She also says she believes he didn't do anything wrong. Sure. Ben's whole angle is that unless someone puts their name on a claim, it doesn't count. Megyn pushes back, says whistleblowers are scared, and that's valid. But it's also clear neither of them actually know what's in those files. They're speculating like the rest of us. Still, the fact they're even talking about it tells you this story has legs. Democrats, pay attention. This might be one of those rare issues where truth cuts across party lines. People want answers. And if they exist, it's time to release them. Because if there's nothing to hide, why all the hiding?